Guys, let's complete section 33.2 muscular system. The last thing we took was what stimulates neurons, what stimulates muscles to start contraction, and we said neurons stimulate muscles to start contractions at the neuromuscular junction. Okay, after the stimulation by the neuron, what will happen to give an order to the muscles to contract? First of all, the neurons will stimulate the muscle at the neuromuscular junction by stimulation of secretion of neurotransmitters, chemicals, to help the transmission of the signal, neurotransmitter. What will the neurotransmitter do? The neurotransmitter will stimulate the calcium channels to open. Once the calcium channels opened in the sarcomere, what will happen? The calcium will enter to the actin and will bind to this regulatory protein. This protein is called the regulatory protein. It prevents the actin from being attached and pulled by myosin, because as you know, the process of contraction is the process of pulling of the actin by myosin. But if there is no contraction, to control contraction or to stop contraction, the regulatory proteins will bind to the actin to decrease the exposure of the binding sites in actin to myosin. After opening calcium channels, the calcium, this green color is the calcium. This calcium will bind to the regulatory protein to let the myosin to bind to actin. After binding to the actin, the myosin will start to pull actin to start contraction. Look at this figure. Number 1, this is the actin. While binding to the regulatory protein, the active sites are not exposed at all for the binding to myosin. After opening the calcium channels by the help of neurotransmitter, what will happen? Look at the calcium here. The calcium will start to bind to this regulatory protein to make it loose and to let the actin binding site, here it is, the actin binding site free to the myosin to bind to it. After binding of myosin to the actin, the myosin will start to pull actin like that. Look how there is pulling action, look, by the help of ATP, pulling of the actin to help movement or to allow movement and contraction, and this is called the filament action. The filament action